Hey, good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who are just joined us in the last couple of minutes, this is Will Cote from Parks and Trails, New York. Thank you for being a little bit early. We're just gonna kind of wait a few more minutes here as some more folks join us. I know you all are doing your best to keep muted. Please keep doing that so we have a good experience for everybody who's participating, but feel free to turn your video on if you would like. Certainly don't have to though. You're more than welcome to if you would like to choose that option. And we're the PTNY and OSI teams are really excited for today. I hope this is going to be a really meaningful workshop for everybody. What a better way to spend a snowy afternoon than learning about advocacy and storytelling and fighting for our public land. So it should be a good experience. We do have a lot of folks joining us from all over the state today, which we really appreciate. So thank you everyone who took the time out of your busy day. We have folks from the Martin House out in the Buffalo area. We also have a number of folks here from the Capital Region, Five Rivers, the Moreau Lake State Park group. We have a lot of you, so thank you. Probably because you're here to support Nancy, which we appreciate. We also have Knox Farm out from Western New York, friends from Letchworth, and we also have a number of folks from the Hudson Valley area. So just want to thank those folks for coming out too. Mills Mansion at Statsburg, FDR State Park. Of course, we have Hudson Highlands Land Trust, and we also have our friends from the Palisades Conservancy. So thank you for joining us. It actually looks like we have some folks from Long Island as well. So it looks like Planting Fields is here, and we have some folks from Connecticut. So thank you for coming through and joining us this afternoon. So it looks like it's just about 4. We're gonna wait just a few more minutes here. We have a number of folks joining us right now. So I want to be mindful of everyone's time, but probably just give it a couple more minutes. Hi, Linda. Thank you for introducing yourselves in the chat. Feel free, other folks, to do so as well. It's always nice to see where folks are coming from and what organizations they're representing. That's right. Walt just mentioned that we're competing against the Mars landing that NASA just achieved. So I appreciate you also toggling over to us, but certainly a historic event. So glad it went well. I haven't really been following.
What's Mars compared to parks?
Hi, Robin. I know. Parks are certainly much more tangible, I suppose, than some Martian landscape, hundreds of thousands of miles from here.
About 20 or 30 years difference in when you can enjoy it.
That's true too. All right, so we're just gonna give it one more moment here. We are expecting a few more participants, but we'll get started momentarily. I don't wanna waste too many of your folks' time.
Many of you couldn't remember the moon landing in '69.
We did.
Joining us now is the acting administrator of NASA, Steve Jurczyk. Steve, welcome and congratulations.
All right, we're going to get started. Again, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Just as a quick reminder, I know that that Shana will be going over some housekeeping rules, but though it is compelling with the Mars landing, would encourage folks to just keep themselves muted so everyone can have an enjoyable experience. But with that said, I just want to welcome everyone and say good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Will Cote. I'm the Parks Program Director for Parks and Trails New York. And on behalf of the entire Parks and Trails New York team, as well as our colleagues at the Open Space Institute, I want to thank you for joining us for this advocacy-focused best practice workshop designed to support grassroots friends groups. So our goals with this workshop are really threefold. First, we want to identify some ways in which you can use your expertise and passion to craft a narrative in order to help protect the outdoor spaces that you love and that you champion. We also want to provide some best practices for interacting with legislators and holding a successful legislative meeting. And finally, we want to share our 2021 advocacy efforts and ways that you can get involved in that. So this afternoon's workshop's going to be split into three different parts to kind of keep things moving along and keep you engaged. First, we're going to discuss our plans for Park Advocacy Day this year and share the ways that you can get involved. As I mentioned, this will include a letter writing and a social media campaign. After that, we're going to switch it up and we're going to hear from our panelists, our experts on the matter. First, we're going to welcome Nancy Dyer. She's from the Friends of Moreau Lake State Park and also the Saratoga Capital District State Park of Regional Commissioners. We're also going to welcome the Honorable Jose Serrano, the New York State Senator and Chair of the State Committee for Cultural Affairs, Tourism, Parks, and Recreation. And both Nancy and Senator Serrano are going to be sharing their own stories and providing some really insightful points on how to tell a compelling story and some tips on how to hold a successful legislative meeting, regardless of whether you're meeting with a state senator or your town supervisor. Then we're going to briefly discuss how to create a legislative ask using our own talking points for this year's Park Advocacy Day as an example. And then we'll allocate the remainder of the time, roughly 15 minutes or so, to provide all of you the opportunity to ask questions and receive answers from our speakers and the PTNY and OSI teams. So our goal for tonight's event is to be a workshop. And we really want to hear from you to learn together, share best practices, and collaborate. So we really welcome and encourage you to share something that you may have encountered or learned in your own efforts along the way. And feel free to share those insights and any questions that you might have in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that throughout. So with that out of the way, I'd like to turn it over to Shana for some housekeeping.
Thank you, Will. So yeah, Will went over a couple of these points already. Before we begin, let me just go over some housekeeping points. First of all, you are muted. And if you don't find yourself muted, please mute yourself and stay muted throughout the presentation. Just because I'm asking this does not mean we do not want to hear from you. I strongly encourage you to use the chat feature throughout the program to share thoughts, questions, and insights with our speakers and also each other. So if you're not familiar with Zoom, you can use the chat feature on the bottom bar of your screen. If you have it full screen mode, you'll be able to see one of the options on the bottom there is the chat. So put everything into there. And any questions that you do put in the chat now or you send directly to me, we will address during the Q&A portion later on in the program. So after all, that is why we're here today. We want to hear from you, answer your questions. So feel free to use that. Additionally, if you have any technical difficulties, put that in the chat as well. Our team is monitoring it and we'll be able to help you. If you can't access the chat at all, please contact Will. His email's on the screen now. And if you get kicked out and you can't find it, it's also on the PTNY website. So check that out. So let's get the conversation going. We welcome you to introduce yourself in the chat. Will mentioned that earlier, but if you're just showing up, put your name, group affiliation, and maybe your favorite winter outdoor activity. Share that with your colleagues here. Yes, so of course, I would like to acknowledge the creative and dedicated team who has helped develop today's program. So we have Will Cote, who you just heard from. He's our Parks Program Director. I'm Shana, I'm the Parks Program Coordinator at PTNY. Then we have our Arthur Savage intern, Erica Schneider, who's running everything behind the scenes here. So give her a big shout out. Our Executive Director, Robin Dropkin, who joined us for the call. And a special thank you to Maria Garcia from the Open Space Institute, who will be presenting today as well. And with that, let's get to the main event. So History of Park Advocacy Day. What is Park Advocacy Day? So it's an annual advocacy event hosted by Parks and Trails New York and the Open Space Institute's Alliance for New York State Parks. This year we celebrate the 15th anniversary. So thank you. Traditionally, park supporters from across the state, dubbed the Green Scarf Brigade, as you can see here in this photo, gather in Albany on the first Monday of March to meet with state legislators to connect on the value of our great park system that they bring to their constituencies, the economy, and communities across the state. Last year, we had over 100 friends and partners, over 28 friends groups join us at the Capitol to advocate for the continued revitalization of the state park system and for healthier and more economically sound and vibrant communities that parks always help provide. This event gives us a chance to give our parks a voice and interact with the state's decision makers on a personal level. Continuing these conversations each year helps us form stronger relationships so we can keep coming back and helping to advocate for parks year after year. And it's because of advocates like you, really, and your support that the park system is experiencing an ongoing influx of capital dollars. And these dollars help tackle the backlog of needed repairs at parks and really expand our thriving network of public green space to more communities across the state. So for that, we thank you. And although Park Advocacy Day will look a little different this year, we hope you will join us in advocating for our parks in new and exciting ways and really continue to use your stories to influence lawmakers and help continue to protect and enhance our state's environmental and cultural future. So what will Park Advocacy Day look like this year? Just 10 years ago, PTNY with our supporters, partners, and fellow advocates, we launched the Save Our Parks campaign. Together, we not only stopped the closure of 88 New York State parks, but also helped secure the New York Parks 2020 capital funding, which leveraged more than $1.2 billion in private funds for more than 900 improvement projects and over 200 parks, trails, and historic sites across New York. Today, we are thankfully not coming from a place of crisis. Instead, we're focused more on continuing to give our parks a voice and interact with the state's decision makers on a personal level. However, given the social distancing guidelines and limited access to the Capitol and the Legislative Office building in Albany, we've reimagined Park Advocacy Day to be conducted completely virtually. I'm sure that's not the first time you've heard that for an event that you're hoping to attend. But for this reason, PAD 2021 will be a smaller, more targeted event that focuses on meeting with key members and leaders of the legislature. So participants will be individually invited based on legislative district, parks region, and experience in past Park Advocacy Days. If we have reached out to you, you've probably heard from Will, please remember to attend a virtual event on Tuesday, March 2nd. We'll be sending out an invite next week for that. If you are not participating in legislative meetings with us, we still want you to feel included and empowered to really lend your voice to the chorus of advocates. We still need you. One of the best ways to do that is to tell your own story. So today, that's what this is really about. We're going to highlight ways to effectively advocate for your parks this year and to make sure that your individual stories are heard and that they're impactful. So that leads into telling your story. I think it's safe to assume that everyone here has an interest in preserving and protecting New York's public green spaces, not just for now, but also for future generations. Your reasoning might be different than the person on Zoom right underneath you, but it's important to recognize and remember that we're all working together towards this one common goal. And as we mentioned earlier, showcasing these real-life examples of how proper funding impacts individuals across the state will really make a stronger case for safeguarding these resources in the future. And that's what this is about. So, for example, a lot of your groups or favorite places have directly benefited from the EPF or from New York's Parks or DEC capital funding. Maybe you've seen an influx of visitors to your site since infrastructure has been revitalized, or you've been able to host more student groups to your parks through the Connect Kids to Parks program. And it isn't just the state's capital investment that's transforming our parks. You are making a significant impact as well through the continuous hard work of friends groups across the state. Many of you are making use of the resources at your disposal, like the Park and Trail Partnership Grant, to protect old buildings, update exhibits, develop new programming, welcoming families and visitors to access and enjoy these resources. So our goal tonight is that these presentations really help you to create a narrative of your own, and that you feel encouraged to share that narrative to help protect our parks. So let's look at first a handful of strategies we can use to broadcast your story. Really grab the attention of your audience, and especially legislators, which was the key to the success of your advocacy efforts. To talk us through the power of letter writing and social media engagement, I would like to welcome Maria Garcia, Senior Communications Associate with the Open Space Institute, our partner for Park Advocacy Day. Maria, you are up.
Hi guys, good afternoon and thanks for having me. I'm just going to talk a little bit about sending letters to legislators and how that can be an incredibly effective tool. And then I'm going to move on to talk a little bit about the social media campaign. So about letter writing, experience has shown that informed and clearly written letters can have an impact on political decisions. So even when elected officials are deciding on issues, letters let them know the cost of their decision and encourage them to act in accordance with the views of their constituencies. And additionally, letters are frequently tracked by the legislators to tell them how to vote. And you know, if you're sending a letter to your legislator, they frequently know that you're also more likely to vote. So for Park Advocacy Day, our goals for the letter writing campaign are that we get all of our participants to share our thoughts and issues that we care about with elected officials. And so this year we're launching a digital campaign that is 100% online and auto tracks legislators so that people won't have to look them up in order to send letters. And basically, letter writing reinforces our asks and what we want to lawmakers by creating a chorus of voices. So like, you know, lawmakers are just like us. So the more we repeat key messages, the better we are to remember the things that people cared about and that we think are important. So one of the really important things about letter writing is that you should make it personal and really share why parks are important to you, especially since we've prefabricated a template letter for everyone to use. We've included a section where people can tell their own park story and talk about why parks are important to them. So for example, for me, I now live in Albany, but I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. And when I was younger, a lot of the parks in my neighborhood were filled with concrete. So if I still lived in Brooklyn, I would, you know, support parks funding when I speak to my legislator, and I would also, you know, mention about the importance of grass and trees to make nature more accessible for everyone. So now that we're all thinking a little bit about our individual park stories, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how everyone can participate. So the main way to participate this year is through this new software that OSI and PTNY have created. And later this week, PTNY will be sharing a link with everyone that will let you access the software. So the software is easy to use, it's online, and it automatically matches individuals with the legislators for their districts. And so you won't have to look up anything about your legislators, but you will have the opportunity to add your own personal stories and thoughts. So I've tried the software several times and it's really easy to use. It takes probably 5 minutes to send the letter, and you get to review it and edit the section where you'll tell your own park story, and then the letter will come from your email address. Additionally, you know, maybe some people don't like emails, they don't want to send a digital letter, they want a little bit more of a personal touch. And so if that is the option that you would like, the software link will also enable you to print a PDF of your letter. So you can type in the section where you tell your park story and then print a PDF of the letter to send it to your legislator. And then for those who are feeling, you know, particularly ambitious, I'm sure you could use the draft template as the basis for handwriting a letter and sending it to your legislator. Another really cool perk about the software that we're launching this year is that directly from the platform, you can share the letter on Twitter or email it to a friend or even send it to your local newspaper. So this year it's going to be really connected digitally. The only thing that we're asking is that everyone please send their letter by Friday, March 19th. Because we're trying to launch the campaign from this Friday to the 19th. And that's the most important part of the campaign, just to share it with as many people as possible so that we can all add our voices and talk about why we love and support parks and need full parks funding. So now I'm going to talk about the social media campaign. The social media campaign is taking place primarily on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and social media has proven to be highly effective. I think, even in the past year, we've seen the impact social media can have on spreading social messages. So social media helps you reach more people in more places, and this includes lawmakers. A lot of elected officials are on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and they're checking it, and their staff is checking it. And so this year we really want to utilize Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to reach our officials. So for this campaign, I understand it can be really daunting to create a message on social media that everyone's going to see. So we created a social media toolkit, and in the toolkit there are draft social media messages that support all of the causes that we've laid out today, whether that be the Environmental Protection Fund or the Parks 100 initiative. And so you have prefabricated messages that you can copy and paste and tailor for your specific needs. So if you wanted to send a message about supporting the EPF and you wanted to tag and use our hashtags, all you have to do is copy and paste it and then add your local officials tags. And another great thing about the toolkit is that if you are on a crunch for time or you don't know what image to use, we've also provided 18 images that use our Park Advocacy Day hashtag that anyone can access through the toolkit, which will be sent to you later this week. And so our new hashtag for this year that we're unrolling is hashtag Parks Provide. You may have seen it on Shayna's background. And essentially we're asking people to use the hashtag Parks Provide to talk about what parks have provided you. So some of our images, like the one you see on the screen, say hashtag Parks Provide peace when I need it, or hashtag Parks Provide a space to run, because there are so many things that parks have provided us. And so we really want to share the message not only with other people, but also with our legislators. And the goal is to talk about how parks enhance our lives and make the case for why they need full funding. And so, for storytelling, it's really, really important to be personal. So we're asking people to really dig deep and think about what messages would resonate with other people. Because as Shayna mentioned, we all have, stories to tell and stories to share about parks. So this all sounds like a lot, but I guess the two main important bits are that we will send you all the information about the letter writing campaign, and it's a really quick 5 minutes to send a letter to your legislator if you want to do the email version. And then the second thing is we also want to engage people on social media. So if you're interested in doing that, we also have a toolkit prepared that will enable you to share the message of why parks are important to you on social media. And with that, I will pass it back to Shayna.
Thank you, Maria, for sharing that. I just quickly want to touch on a third option that we're suggesting people get involved in for park advocacy this year, and that would be to hold your own meetings with leaders from your community. For those of you who have joined us for Park Advocacy Day in the past or who have participated in another lobby day across the state, you've likely seen the impact of having these face-to-face meetings with legislators or their staff. If you do go this route, we do suggest using the talking points that we've created for Park Advocacy Day. We will get into more detail on those later, so don't worry. But you can use those as your asks during your meetings to keep messaging consistent with park supporters across New York. Or you can use them as an example to create your own asks that really meet your needs. In order to be mindful of your time, we won't go into too much detail on this option, but everything we are discussing in the next section of the workshop should be really helpful for creating these asks and setting up these meetings. But as always, feel free to contact us with any questions you may have about setting up meetings with your state legislators. The Parks team here at PTNY, if you've joined us for any past events, you know that we are always willing to help you and excited to help you. So we will pass it on. So today we have two extraordinary individuals and skilled storytellers with unique experience working to protect our parks that I'm excited to hear from. First, I'm excited to introduce Nancy Dyer, who is a friend of Moreau Lake State Park, as well as a Saratoga Capital District State Park Regional Commissioner. Nancy has participated in a handful of park advocacy days, and she will share not only her story, but also some wisdom on framing your own story and some tips for how to hold a successful legislative meeting from a participant's perspective. Nancy, I turn it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure as always, and a big thank you to PTNY for all that you do and to everyone else for showing up today. And I've got 10 minutes. I'm going to try to go fast, so hold on to your seat. I've been with the Friends of Moreau, an active member for about 8 years, maybe more. I don't know, it flies by. And I've been on the commission for probably 3 years. So that's a little bit about me. So I want to get right to it. You're probably thinking, as I did when I first started, what do I have to offer? I'm just one person. I'm just this, that, or the other thing. And here I am in the halls of the Capitol talking to these legislators. So I think, Erica, are you handling the? Okay, so go. You know what though? Wait. I want you to reframe that for yourselves. Change it to I am a champion. I am important. I am knowledgeable about my park and site. I am passionate. They're much stronger than I'm just. Okay, next. I see you as inspiring, and you have important stories to tell. And every single one of us is an ambassador for our park. Remember that when you're out and about and you're talking to people, anybody, you're an ambassador for your park. Next. What's your story? Here's some like little ticklers. Why are you thankful? Why do you care? Why did you join your friends group? What will make others want to join your friends group or your cause? Why are you here today? Why do you love your park or historic site? How do you use it or interact with it? What about your park or site is compelling? And do you have a point to make or a need addressed? How did that come to be? Have others shared a story with you about why they're thankful or something incredible that happened while they were at the park or in the site? People want to be part of something impactful and successful. Are you successful? Are you impactful? How? Are you sharing it? Don't keep these things a secret. Shout it from the mountaintop. Be proud. Because when you're the person or the group that others want to get some of that or be part of that, think about people you've met that are living their calling and passion. Their energy is evident and it's compelling. You want to be around them. You want to hire them. You want to work with them. You want to go hiking with them. You want to kayak with them. You want to go biking with them. Be that, because then you don't have to ask. They just want to be there. They'll show up. So get out there, make your noise. And if you've received funding, as they've already talked about, you're asking state legislators to keep funding and give more funding. What's their return on investment been? They don't always know. If we aren't telling them, they don't know, and we need to be clear about that. How has the project impacted your park? How's it made you feel? How's it made your park or site feel? How are the employees and people who work there, how do they feel about what you've been able to do, turning those funds into things for their park, things that make their lives easier? Have you been able to increase capacity? How are you leveraging the ability to support your park? Quantifiable information that you can share to support the impact. Like we gained 50 new members and 5 new volunteers. So now our little core of volunteers aren't totally stressed out. Now we can actually offer more programming because of this money. Okay, next. Story tips. So we all know they help to relate and understand things. Some tips. Here's one I learned a long time ago. Use and instead of but. But negates everything that came before it. So change out that word whenever you can, become more conscious of it. Use and. Use the word challenge instead of problem or weakness. A challenge is a call to action. It implies the intent to resolve, whereas a problem or a weakness connotes acceptance or complaining. Pain and pleasure. People are motivated more to move away from pain and fear than they are toward pleasure. Here's an example, Parks and Trails EPF money that we got at Moreau Lake State Park, we used to build boat racks and a fence. Now, boat racks are nice, fences are nice, but what really motivated us to do it and what became a compelling story for EPF funding through the Parks and Trails grant program was the fact that plants had been found, rare plants growing on the shores of our lake were discovered. And people can pay to have their boats left at the lake all summer long, and they leave them on the shore and we're tying them up to trees. Well, all of a sudden we have this rare plant. So people are yanking their boats across the shoreline, walking and trampling this rare plant. Then they're taking them out, hooking them up to a tree. Well, over years, what started to happen is they're girdling the trees. That will kill the trees. So now all of a sudden our pain became very evident. And it became a really compelling reason to support our ask for that money. And we were able to build them, and it's awesome. What pain or fear is your group or site facing? What will happen if funding is cut? We don't want to go back to when parks are threatened to be closed, but think about that. If you were around then, it motivated people to get out and advocate, to stand in their park and ask for funding. So people move away from pain and fear more than they do towards pleasure. Feelings, feelings and facts, heart and head. Feelings grab people and fold them into your cause. Pluck at their heartstrings. Numbers, facts, support, justify, and quantify impact. You need both. Tell your story to someone, practice it. Accept constructive advice to make it better. A different perspective may tie your story to an ask or a point that you hadn't considered. What's your point? What's your goal? Tell it to somebody. Are you accomplishing what you're intended to accomplish? And the last one there, weave stories together to create a picture or build support for an issue. That you can do as an individual. That was more geared towards when you're in a group speaking, and I'll speak more to this in another slide. You all have stories you don't want to repeat, but you can weave them together on the fly, like passing a baton, so that you build and create better support. Okay, next. Okay, so let me tell you my story that I want to share this time around, and things to watch out for that you want to weave into yours. You want to show gratitude. You want to be thankful. You want to address feelings, right? We're tugging at heartstrings here. You want to share pains and challenges. So because we want to move people, we want to motivate people. And if you have an ask or you need help, ask it, because they're not mind readers. You're not going to get help. Everyone wants to help. So ask for help. You're likely going to get it. So at Moreau, one of the things, so I'm going to put my commissioner hat on, not my friends or park user hat on, because I need to advocate and I feel it necessary to advocate. And we've been doing this a little bit over the years here for operational funding. We've had a lot of capital funding. Operational funding has stayed steady, which really it has decreased. Minimum wage is increasing, everything is more expensive. So why is that important? It's hurting our staff and our support system. What opportunities, so here's where I want people to think. What opportunities are being lost or put on the back burner? What capacity is being diminished because we're not supporting operations? What potential is unrealized? These are all soft costs They're not visible as dilapidated buildings or broken roads or boat racks or nature centers. So they don't carry the public visibility. Something not happening isn't always seen or noticed. So at Morrill Lake State Park, we were really fortunate to get 6 cabins built for winter all year camping, which we never had before. So our park's getting used in a way in the wintertime it hasn't. These buildings are fabulous. They are so fantastic. The first time I walked back there to see them, I was blown away. I was so proud that my state and my park invested in something outrageously magnificent. That was incredible. They're great for PR. They're great for pictures, for publications, right? The state can capitalize on these things. They're very visual and they're gorgeous. People from around the state, I've spoken with the office management. They are in such high demand. They're never vacant. People from all over the state and out of state want to stay in these things. So where's the pain? Well, we've never had these in our park before. Our staff that didn't get increased has to maintain them, clean them, chop wood, stack wood. The rangers get called because people lock themselves out. So now security has extra responsibilities, management has extra responsibilities, and our park doesn't even have a manager. That's a whole nother story. So our staff has to check people in, they have to check people out. They're doing it. Nobody feels any pain from that except our staff. They're the ones. So what's not happening, because those things have to happen. Our staff is our front line. They are under fire and they're doing it graciously. They're not making noise. They can't go advocate for themselves. They're employees of the state. We become their voice. So as a commissioner, I felt it necessary. There's a lot of friends and individuals who are advocating for parks. So that's where I'm coming from. So our capital investments are really needed, but are they being underutilized because we aren't supporting them? It's irresponsible. We wouldn't do it as individuals. We wouldn't do it as businesses to not support the massive, unbelievably incredible investments we're making. So that's my story for legislators this time around. And, you know, I hope I showed gratitude. I hope I plucked at some feelings. I definitely showed a pain, and I asked for help. I want their funding. Okay, next. Tips for success. Whoops, tips for success. I'm going to go through really quick. At the end of the day, I think Shana said it, these are people just like you and me. So don't be googly-eyed, but always have an attitude of gratitude and patience. Be firm and confident, never confrontational in your writings, in your posts, and in face-to-face. The next few are for when you're kind of meeting either virtually or in person. Make your plan. You're going to be in groups. Make your plan ahead of time. Meet up prior to your first appointment. Share your stories with each other. Like I said before, you can weave these stories together as the situation calls because you've pre-discussed what each person is there for. You can pass the baton to make a really nice story. Are any of you in their district? Remember, these are elected officials. They want to be talking to their constituents. If you're not in their district, do you know somebody who is? What are their sites and historic sites and parks in their district? Do you visit them? Are they important to you? Be worthy of their time because some of them will point that out. Not all of them and not a lot of them. Where do I want to go here? And so in doing all of those things prior to meeting with them, you'll come across as a tight-knit group of people who care about and value your park and each other. We leave those in our midst with the same feelings. If we aren't in front of them, there are plenty of others with needs of their own who will be. Our work advocating is critical. Don't assume others know what's going on. And don't feel like your needs are lesser than anybody else advocating in Albany. Our needs are not more or less. It's our task to make sure we make an impact large enough to be remembered in a positive way. Listen to your legislators' support or lack thereof. Find out why. This is a learning opportunity for us. Follow up later with any information that may support or sway. They're often big users of their parks and historic sites. where they grew up, where they live now, and where they legislate. Listen to their stories. Be ready to tie those into whatever ask or want or need that you have. Tie it back. The afternoon, if you're doing this all day, can be very challenging. Keep up your energy. You may want to do jumping jacks or take a moment in the afternoon to refocus, because you can get like dreary and you don't want to lose anybody's connection. So refocus, breathe, get psyched again. And last but not least here, write a note of thanks. They talked about that before. Snail mail, getting something handwritten. How often do you get one? They pin it up on their boards. Their staff pin those things on boards. It's an extremely impactful thing. Next. You just need to show up. Have a story to share. If you're not doing it, who will? Hopefully you'll feel great because you're making a difference. And I hope you come to realize you're not alone. You're part of a much larger community. And PTNY is captain of this ship. They do an amazing job providing us with resources. So please take advantage of them. Thank you. Oh, there's my information. If anybody needs to reach out to me by phone or email, feel free to do so. Thanks.
Nancy, thank you so much. And just so everyone knows, you don't have to frantically write down her phone number or email now. We will be sending this out after, so don't worry there. But Nancy, thank you so much for your insight and wisdom. Always love hearing from you. And we look forward to you leading a group again at PAD this year. For everyone else, as you can tell, Nancy is super accessible and very knowledgeable. She will be with us for the Q&A session, so you can ask her some questions directly, but we would also be happy to connect you after the workshop if that is something you're looking forward to. Next, it is my honor to introduce New York State Senator Jose Serrano. Senator Serrano is both the chair of the Majority Conference and the chair of the Committee on Cultural Affairs, Tourism, Parks, and Recreation. Senator Serrano joined us at previous Park Advocacy Days and is an avid supporter of our parks and public lands in both his personal and professional life. Senator, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today on the importance of parks to you and what makes a memorable meeting with advocates.
Thank you very much. Such a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you for inviting me to speak with this wonderful group. Normally we'd be together in person early in the morning up in Albany with green scarves, but instead we are doing it virtually, and it's safer this way. But I'm so grateful that we're able to do it, that we're able to get together and talk about this, because quite frankly, the issues here are probably more important now than ever. And we shouldn't lose sight of the importance of our parks as we move through the budget season. And I'd like to thank Parks and Trails and Open Space and all of the different groups and organizations and friends groups who are part of this wonderful occasion in Albany. I have said oftentimes that Parks Day is easily my favorite day of the session calendar, to be surrounded by so many people who care so deeply about how our parks interact with our society, to see folks going through the halls, talking about something that is so intrinsically positive and nonpartisan, yet so critical is such a wonderful thing. And I also know that it's not an easy day. I know that coming up to Albany for that day, being there early in the morning, meeting with a lot of different individuals, running from one place to the other, dealing with super crowded elevators, you name it. I know it's a lot of work, but we deeply appreciate it, those of us in the legislature, because you make the case a whole lot better than we can. So with that, talk a little bit about my sort of, my take on how I talk to my colleagues about parks. And, in order to do that, I have to tell you a little bit about my interactions with our wonderful parks over the years. So as a kid growing up in the 1970s in the South Bronx, there really wasn't a lot of connection to nature. Unfortunately, we all gravitate to it, and we really do yearn for interaction with nature. But growing up in an urban environment, especially back then, before we knew about urban planning that incorporated green spaces as we're doing now, it was a lot tougher. So as a child, I had the opportunity through a nonprofit on the Lower East Side of Manhattan to go to sleepaway summer camp 4 summers in a row in Harriman State Park. And at that time, sleepaway camp was like the biggest thing you could do. It was something that kids wanted to do. Kids in the neighborhood, in the South Bronx, East Harlem, the Lower East Side, you name it. We wanted to get into one of these camps. We wanted to tell stories when we came back about the bonfires and the swimming races we won, and you name it. And it was something that I was very fortunate to be a part of. And Harriman, I realized, was so close to the Bronx, and but yet it was, you know, you're out in the woods, you're out in the forest. So it sparked in me a deeper understanding of this lifestyle of nature. And it was something that as an adult, I wanted to remain close to it, whether it be through hiking or camping. And my wife and I are raising our 2 children very much in that model. And every chance we get, we are in Harriman, we're at Minnewaska. We try our best to utilize different park spaces close to home. But you know, we go to some of our easy ones and that are close enough to us. And it really has had an amazing effect on our children. And you know, it's one of the surefire ways to make sure they get along is when we're out on a hiking trail, because that's the, you know, it seems to magically transform their ability to get along as siblings. So, you know, it really is, I think, a wonderful experience for individuals as well as for families. So fast forward a little bit, you know, I run for office, I run for the city council, then I run for the state senate, and I'm fortunate enough to become chair of this committee. And it's something that I'm very passionate about, because I believe on so many multiple levels, parks and access to parks is such a basic yet extremely important and critical thing for people in every community. So I saw firsthand how parks were transformational in my own life, and how they set in motion small ripples that got bigger and bigger over time. And it gave me a deeper appreciation of the amount of health that you can attain, or positive health impacts, for being part of parks. Of course, you know, if you're hiking, you're thinking, wow, I'm physically, you know, getting a good workout here. This is great. But the mental health aspect is probably even more significant than the physical health aspect. And more data beyond anecdotal data has shown that spending time in nature is probably more effective than anti-anxiety medications in achieving the said goal. So with all that in mind, and considering the community that I represent in the South Bronx and East Harlem, with some of the highest health disparities of any community throughout the state of New York, it became a really close or easy fit for me as an elected official from the city to talk about parks in upstate New York as critically important for all of us. So when about 10 years ago, we were facing a little bit more than 10 years ago, one of the worst economic crises that the state had ever experienced. And one of the proposals that was put on the table by the executive at the time was to close about 91 state parks in order to fill a budget gap that we were experiencing. And I, as chair of the committee, you know, quickly reached out to all of my colleagues and said, we have to stop this from happening. And it was an amazing thing to see in a hyper-partisan Albany, where Democrats and Republicans rarely get along, rarely talk to each other, rarely do anything. We had a press conference that had just as many Republicans as Democrats of the state Senate standing together saying, we can't let this happen. We have to save our parks. We have to find a way. And you know what? We were able to do it. Those parks did not close. And over the years, we've been trying to find additional ways. I know over the years, the current executive has done a great job of including additional capital funds for repairs, and hopefully we'll continue to do that over the next 4 years. But in framing and discussing with my colleagues as to why support of the parks is far more than a nice thing to do if we can do it. You know, there's so many budget priorities that people go nuts about. And this is one that I think should be just as important as any other pillar within our budget. Without our parks, and New York State is, our state park system is our crown jewel. If we don't preserve and enhance our green spaces, we severely limit our constituents' ability to engage in a healthy lifestyle that's sorely needed. We limit our economic engine that these parks create through the environmental tourism and the cultural tourism that they all bring. And that's something that's quantifiable. But during the COVID pandemic, we saw how critically important our parks were, in case we weren't sure. While everything else was going south, our park usership was going up. And it had been going up prior to the pandemic, and it continued to go up. And I know next year we'll probably set a new record. And my family and I were out hiking in Harriman a couple of weeks ago, and it was cold. And I figured, oh, this is great, perfect day to go. Nobody's going to be there. Boy, was I wrong. The trails were packed. It was wonderful. I had no complaints, but it was certainly not like a typical January day out in the trails. And this is a good thing. People are engaging in that natural culture, the nature culture. One of the things that I've been trying to do is to try to help increase diversity out there. You know, those of us who live in the city, you know, Bear Mountain is like the Emerald City for us. If we can get up to Bear Mountain and spend a day out there on boating or swimming or hiking, it really is such a wonderful experience. But it doesn't happen as often as it should. And for communities of color, for the Latino African American community, and we want to try to get more diverse communities to enjoy all of the transformative things that I witnessed out in the parks, that my kids are as well. And also to try to help all New Yorkers to become better stewards of their parks. So yes, we're year over year increasing park usership, but we're seeing some of the negative effects in that we have some trash out on the trails and some overuse in some areas. It's honestly, it's a good problem to have, but we need to manage it. And I think the way that we do it is not by turning anyone away. That's not the answer. We want more people out there, but we want them all to become stewards of their park, to feel that it is their park, which it is, and to care for it and carry in and carry out. And all the things I learned as a camper, and I teach my kids, more and more people I think can engage in that. And I think that makes the experience even more fulfilling. So, you know, I talked for quite a bit here. I don't want to hog up too much more time, but you could tell I'm quite passionate about this because I've seen what it can do, how it changed my life, how it is something that we look forward to and we long for it. And my kids are really amazing in their appreciation for what the parks bring to their lives. And getting out on the trails, getting out on the water, and bringing front and center how important it is that we fund these entities. They're not going to pay for themselves. And the park system is an old historic one with infrastructure needs that are great. And I think the, you know, sort of rallying the troops and getting people to understand that this is not, the parks are not just for one subset of people in New York State, they're for everyone. Whether you're in the South Bronx or East Harlem or upstate New York, that transformative experience is going to be exactly the same. And at a time of hyper-partisanship, the parks are what bring us together. We don't ask people passing us on the trails what political persuasion they're from. That's irrelevant. We all speak the same language out on the trails. And it is such a wonderful thing. And it's, you know, I hope more and more people experience it.
Thank you very much, Senator. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts. It's always nice to hear people's perspective, and I think both you and Nancy really highlighted the passion that goes into it. It's very tangible, and it does get people really motivated. So, thanks for sharing your words, your story, the passion, and of course for everything that you do for our public lands and the legislature. We really appreciate it, and we all look forward to working with you more on that in the future. So we're going to transition to this last aspect of our workshop tonight, and really just kind of talk a little bit about our specific asks and our talking points for Park Advocacy Day. So, by now you're all feeling excited about hopping off the call, crafting a story, and getting out there and lending your voice to the effort. Before that happens, we like to touch upon our specific asks and describe a little bit about the process for you, really just as a way to sort of provide you a case study or a crucible for creating your own. The effort here is, really, hopefully these takeaways are applicable, again, to any level of government, whether it's the state government or, your town board, right in your community. And the other effort here is that we really hope that this encourages you to amplify our own message and take them with you. And of course, share them with your family, your friends, your colleagues, your friends, members, anyone that you think benefits from parks and be willing to lend their voice as well. So, this year for Park Advocacy Day, we are specifically asking our state legislators to support 4 aspects of the governor's proposed budget. First is support the $110 million for the capital budget for state parks. This is called the New York Parks 100 Initiative, as well as support $300 million for the Environmental Protection Fund, and support $1 million for the Park and Trail Partnership grants that fall within the EPF. And finally, to support $75 million for capital investments at the Department of Environmental Conservation. And so for us, developing our legislative asks really boils down to 5 steps, which we'll look at very briefly. First, we want to examine the big picture. We want to ask ourselves, what are the leadership's priorities? What is it that they are staking a claim to? We also want to look specifically at what's in the proposed budget, what is going to be funded, and what is the context, right? What have we asked for in the past? What are our partners' goals? What are our members telling us is important to them? And then finally, we'll craft the ask. And I believe Nancy alluded to it being very clear, being concise, and being really specific. So when we look at the big picture, again, using this year and Park Advocacy Day as that crucible, we have to sort of say what is happening in the grand scheme. Asking those broadest questions: what's happening in the world, what's happening in the state, and then sort of by extension, what's happening in our economy. This step can often get overlooked, and by taking this step, it helps to prevent you getting stuck in your own vacuum or your own little bubble. So this year, obviously that elephant in the room is COVID. It permeated nearly every aspect of our lives, but in what ways? And I think looking at that big picture again, it's about economics, it's about visitation, and it's about programming and engagement that you all had, or we all had, with our parks. So next we want to examine, what is the government committed to doing? And again, this is not necessarily just New York State, but also what is happening in your local village, for example. Looking at the governor's State of the State addresses and the budget proposal in early January, he clearly outlined that New York's top 2 priorities for this coming year is first, responding to COVID, which is a significant public health emergency, as well as having an economic recovery plan and reconciling the trillions of dollars in debt or deficit that exists. So we need to ask ourselves then, with that in mind, where do our goals fit? How can we frame them to follow in the bigger picture and put our priorities forward in a way that makes sense and is in tandem with that? And we use the framework to then shape the asks. Where's the synergy with these goals, and what, if any, concrete examples can we point to? We also took the time to go through the budget and drill down those additional levels to find out what specifically is the executive proposing and what do the state agencies that will be doing that work have to say about those proposals. And now that can seem daunting. Going through the budget can be arduous, but it's absolutely worth it because knowing those details, again, as Nancy mentioned, can make all the difference. So in that examination, we found that there are, we wanted to look at, Are there cuts to existing funding or programming? Are there new initiatives being proposed that could help us or could hurt us? And do our goals align with either of those? And it was also beneficial for us to, again, look at those memos, those public statements being made by state agencies. When we did that, we found the New York 100 initiative, again, the capital funding for state parks. We found that the EPF was being fully funded at $300 million, and we saw that $75 million for DEC capital investments was also proposed. So we saw no significant cuts to New York parks or the EPF. The budget was clear, and the memos from state parks in particular was positive about what was being proposed. And so as partners and supporters of public lands, we strongly supported what we read in the governor's budget proposal. And we wanted to go on record to support that effort and to take a public stance. But before we celebrated or got too far ahead of ourselves or drafted any of our concrete detailed asks, we want to compare those proposals, what we see this year, with what we've seen in the past. And that's a really important step too. Look at what we've asked for. Does it align with where we are now, what we are seeing, and what battle is worth fighting? We all know if you have any personal relationships, you have to choose your battles. You can't fight every single one. So it's always important to sort of weigh those things. What should we push for given the cuts to other sectors and the economic situation that the state is facing? And then of course, we also wanted to ask, what are our partners advocating for and what are their stances? Now, you don't always have to overlap with your partners, but they can be really good barometers of what the other subtle dynamics are going on. So listening to them and what they're putting out in terms of their stance is really important. And of course, it's a great way to learn and adopt some new goals or some new asks. And as they say, imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So if you see someone putting forward an ask or taking a stance that you feel is worth it, take it and let the partner know that you are willing to support them as well. And the other thing that can happen through this process is looking for areas of growth and expansion. So are there additional appropriate asks given the goals of the state? Are there new opportunities that help meet the needs of your members and your supporters? And again, what you're trying to achieve. So our 2021 asks as it relates to Park Advocacy Day, this process led us to these primary points. First, responding to COVID. Excuse me. Our open spaces and public places are key aspects of our public health infrastructure. Record visitation at public lands as residents have sought comfort and recreation during COVID led to 78 million visits in 2020. COVID highlighted the need for additional investment where communities don't have access and to relieve overcrowded parks and prepare for ever higher visitation in the future, as well as include more diverse communities in accessing our public lands and cultural places. All of these elements are key aspects of the New York Parks 100 initiative. And so that was why we really wanted to support that. That leads us also to the second primary point that the governor outlined in the State of the State, which is the economic recovery aspect. It's going to be a core underlying aspect, maybe not even underlying, a very blatant aspect of what is going to be, folks are going to be lobbying for this year. So New York's public lands simply are vital economic drivers. They leverage a 9-to-1 return on the state's investment and create 45,000 jobs a year exclusive of park employees. So continued capital investment in our public lands is an investment in the New York State economy at the community level where folks live and work every single day. And programs like the PTPG, again, funded through the Environmental Protection Fund, is a prime example of that. So since 2015, PTNY has had the ability to award 111 grants out to friends groups. That's leveraged $1.5 million in private investment across the state, all while enhancing the stewardship and access of the public to those spaces. And because of this, going through this process helped us become more informed and clear about what we wanted to ask and what our talking points are, and helped us communicate them, hopefully, to all of you today and to those people that will be participating in Park Advocacy Day early next month. Essentially, focusing on the stories you want to tell comes into light through this process. You'll need to craft your own story about your personal experiences to make it come to life, to make it memorable, to make it meaningful. And as we heard, that's where the passion comes into play. Stories make or break your ask. Maybe PTPG can be your example. Maybe it is phenomenal virtual programming that you had to create to respond to the changes in COVID. Maybe it's visitation or a big success that your organization, your friends group has overcome in the face of the odds. Whatever aligns with your goals is your ask and is your story. So hopefully that is helpful for you all. I know we've moved pretty quickly through it, but we do think it's an important part of this story. So with that, I will throw back over to Shayna, who is going to do a little bit of a curated Q&A for us. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw those in the chat now, but I'm sure she has a list for us that we can help answer.
Yes, so that concludes our presentation portion. As Will said, we will transition Q&A. First, I want to say thank you again to our speakers. Thank you to our participants for sticking with us. I know it's going to be a snowy night, but we appreciate you sticking around and hanging out. So thank you, especially everyone who sent questions or shared them with me directly in the chat. Please continue to do so if you think of anything throughout this session, but we'll just get started. So our first question is from Katrina. Katrina asked, earlier if you live and work in 2 different districts, who should you reach out to? Which legislators should you be talking to? I think, Will, this might be a question for you, and then Maria might be able to tell us more about how that letter writing campaign might be able to do that for them.
Great, yeah, thanks, Shayna. My recommendation would to do it from where you live. I always think that is a good fallback position and a good anchor point. So that would be the recommendation, but I will defer over to Maria, who may have some other insights as well.
Yeah, I agree with Will. Like legislators probably want to hear from, people who live in their district. So you should definitely, find a legislator that, you voted for or didn't vote for, but is within your district. And also the software, it geolocates based on the address you input. So if you input your home address, you're automatically going to get the legislators in your district. If you put in your work address, you'll get the legislators for your work district. But I think it probably makes the most sense to use your home address so that you're talking to legislators who impact, your local parks.
Great, thank you. Yes, so we know that software can do most of that for you. We're getting a couple questions in the chat now. This last one from Rob. A question for Senator Serrano. Is Senator Serrano still around?
Yes, I'm still here.
Great. Senator, we have a question for you. How do the senators prioritize funding for parks in their district? What priorities are used for why certain parks get capital funding and others do not?
Well, I guess there's a couple of things here. There are some individuals who maybe have a capital allocation of their own that they may want to put towards their parks, or they advocate directly in the budget and working with the both houses of the legislature and with the commissioner. That may be one thing, but at least from my point of view, I know there was something here in the chat, and I was replying to Benita regarding Roberto Clemente State Park. There was some longstanding need for capital improvements throughout the park, and over time, a lot of those needs were dealt with. First it was the aquatic center and the swimming pool, and then over time it was some of the ball fields and so on, and the waterfront. And one of the ways that was done was through directly advocating for it and showing how the need was there. But as far as like pots of money, it's not like member items. We in the legislature, unfortunately, don't have member items the way that we used to, where we could put pots of money or move money around from pots into different things. Thankfully, Parks is one of those places where there was a good amount of capital money set aside in the budget, and making the requests around budget time is the best way to do it. And so it's not like a sure shot thing that it will happen, but I have found that if you could demonstrate the need in these places, and the fact that, you know, there hasn't been movement for a while on certain things, you can make a compelling case and get it that way. So I would say that in your particular legislature is the first place to go. But then you can also bring those requests to me as chair of the committee, as we also look to committee priorities as well. So I think there's sort of two ways that you could go at it.
Thank you, Senator. Move on to another topic. We have a question from Walt from the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference. Where is the ask for more operational money? I know Nancy mentioned that a little bit in her talk, but Will, if you have any thoughts on this, and then maybe Nancy too.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You know, we are certainly aware of it. It's something that we continue to examine each year in the governor's proposed budget. You know, ultimately, to provide more of a simple answer, the governor is the one that drives operating costs with the state agencies. So essentially, those decisions are made before the proposed budget comes out. So, you know, we don't address that at Park Advocacy Day because we would then be presenting a problem to legislators that ultimately they can't solve. There's no solution that they can help actualize there in that sense. So we typically have focused then on these capital funding streams. And if I could be a little bit more candid, I think we were expecting there to be significant cuts. And we were very lucky and very fortunate in a lot of ways that the environment and parks and public lands didn't see those in the proposed budget. And so other sectors, other aspects were, and so, you know, we want to be mindful of that dynamic as well. So that is about as succinctly as I can answer that, Jana. But thank you, Walt, for the question. And I know it is an issue, and PTNY and OSI, we do monitor that as best we can.
And Will, you bring up excellent points. And I did preface what I said with the fact that I come at that particular piece with a commissioner's hat. But your point of Park Advocacy Day may not be the most impactful place to do it. And we definitely lead with, this is what's in the budget, and we are extremely fortunate that we didn't get cut. It is a tight budget world out there, and we are extremely fortunate. However, as park commissioners and state commissioners, we kind of tack it on there. Anytime you're in front of legislators, particularly when you are advocating in the Capitol building, in their room, sitting in their office, we don't make a big deal out of that piece of it, but we always want to make sure we're tacking it on there because the next budget season will roll around. And if it's not part of the conversation, it's never going to be put on the table. So there are other times and places to be really more impactful with that and more maybe successful with that ask. But as a commissioner, there's not many of us in our region. So when I'm advocating and I'm at the table and I'm in that room, I want to make sure that that gets kind of tacked on there, that little piece. We don't take up a lot of time with it, but we want to keep it forefront and in the conversation.
Great, thank you, Nancy, for that additional insight on that. That does help clarify it a little bit. Let's see, we do have a question from Pauline. So when PTNY looked at the state budget, we found 75 million proposed for capital improvements for DEC. This may or may not be a question we can answer, but Pauline is a volunteer coordinator for trail maintenance with DEC in Allegheny County, and mentions that operations resources have been cut back and there don't appear to be funds to improve drainage problems on the trail. And she's curious, will trail and campground improvement be included with capital improvements for DEC? Will, do you know any more on this?
Yes, we were actually talking about this not long ago, but yes, the DEC funding is really for campgrounds, accessibility, and increased recreational opportunities. These specific projects would not necessarily be publicly available yet, but it is absolutely something that you could bring to your DEC regional directors and those staff and those offices. I'm quite certain that they have a long list of projects that need to be addressed, but certainly advocating for on that level would be of benefit. But it is, again, just for these broader recreational activities and infrastructure developments.
Great. We have a question from Benita. Is there anything we should be doing at the federal level, advocacy-wise? That's a good question.
That is a good question. Benita, I don't necessarily have an incredibly specific answer for you. I can let you know that PTNY does do some monitoring of federal work. We are involved with the Land and Water Conservation Funds Coalition, and we did do our part to help get that passed through Congress at the end of last year and make that funding permanent. I think we're sort of in a little bit of a wait and see period to see exactly how the administration rolls out some of the changes that they are either doing or undoing from the previous administration as those things happen between changes in who lives in the White House. But so we can provide some more. I would encourage you to check out our website. We do have some information there. In our priorities document, we do have some specifics in terms of what PTNY is going to be addressing, but just continue to monitor it, and things that overlap with our mission and our goals and those of our members, we will certainly be advocating for.
Hey, Will, it's Kathy here. I'd like to add that the Land and Water Conservation Fund has a new category for parks infrastructure, and your community has to have over 50,000 people, but a municipality can get up to $750,000 for some park infrastructure. So if you go on the Land and Water Conservation Fund website, it breaks it down. People think of it as going to, buy land, for the Forest Service or buy land for the Park Service, but there is a new category for parks in there.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So make sure to check that out if you are interested in doing some federal stuff, Benita. Here's a follow-up question from Andrew regarding different districts and advocating or talking to different legislators. But Andrew wants to know, what if you live in a different district than the park that you're involved in, 100 miles apart, say? He feels like he wants to support the district that his parks organization is in. I would tend to agree. I would say, I know Nancy touched on that earlier, if you are meeting with legislators that you're not in their district, make sure, that you have a connection to it. And I would think, working in that district that your park is in and having that direct connection to that park would give you, an edge up talking to this legislator. They would feel, the connection between you and this park. But Will, Maria, do you have any other insights on that?
I would say, why not do both? You can do your local district and also the district from which you work in. And also I would say you would be a very powerful force to get other people in the district that your park that you work within to also send letters. So if you feel really passionate about the park that you work with, not only send a letter because you work there, but also get maybe local people on the ground who live in that. So I think there's room for both.
Yes. All right, I think we have one or two more questions in here. One is from Heather Labner about the Environmental Bond Act. So she mentions that we have left the Bond Act off of our list for PAD talking points. And she's asking if we were suggesting that to delay the ask for the Environmental Bond Act to be reauthorized this year. Will, I know you worked hard on these talking points. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I am looking through the notes I took from the last coalition meeting around the EPF. The coalition is 175 different organizations that are all focused on the Environmental Protection Fund and protecting our clean air and water and those types of things. I believe the current stance that we've been putting out here is that we are absolutely open to it. We would love to support it. And if and when it seems financially feasible for the state to advance that, we will be happy to champion it. But again, my personal take on it, and from sort of what I'm hearing in the ether is that it's sort of a wait and see with what happens financially with the state and if the federal government will be providing some money to New York State along with some others. So if that happens and we are in a less of a deficit, I think the Bond Act could come up. But I would certainly defer to the coalition and what our peer organizations are going to do, and certainly support that effort. Absolutely. And if that does happen, we will most likely be sending out another letter to get you all to participate in that and lend your voices to that campaign.
Great, thank you. Yes, definitely support the Bond Act, but we'll defer to coalitions on this one. One last question I see, and then it's just focused on the details of specific acts. Someone is asking, does Parks 100 connect with Parks 2020? And if so, how?
Mm-hmm.
And then
good question. Yes, so New York Parks 100 in a lot of ways is essentially an extension of New York Parks 2020, which we've had for the better part of the last decade. And as Shana, as you mentioned earlier in the presentation, led to this over $1 billion in investment and 900 projects in 200 communities. The difference with New York 100 is essentially that it's trying to alleviate some of those issues that have been identified or highlighted, I should say is probably a better word, by last year's record visitation and the use that our parks and public lands and historic sites have seen. It also has a slightly different name because it is a lead up to the centennial celebration of New York State's park system, which is coming up in 2024. So this is a 4-year campaign. $110 million a year for 4 years for 440 total leading up to that celebration. So we'll be obviously monitoring that, continue to support it, looking forward to seeing what New York State is planning for that. It should be exciting. But certainly we're keeping our eye on the long term and what will hopefully come after that. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes. All right. Well, that was the last question we have today. I just want to, thank everybody so much again for joining us, unless anyone has any last minute questions. But we really hope you found this workshop, informative, inspiring, engaging. Hope you're ready to get out there and advocate for your parks. And we would love to hear from you and see you at a future event. So make sure, a couple reminders, check your inbox in the next couple days for a follow-up email with us with some resources from this workshop. There will be information on how to access the letter writing campaign. There will be the letter itself. We'll add in there the social media toolkit so we can get started on advocating in different places. And then, as always, I want to remind you to stay involved with us. We thoroughly value your thoughts, opinions, updates and questions, everything that friends can share with us, we value. So quick reminder on that note, if you are applying for a Park and Trail Partnership Grant for round 6, applications are due March 11th. Please make sure you get those in on time. That's only a couple weeks away. And then we are very excited to mark our calendars. We hope you mark yours for I Love My Park Day. This year, it will be the full weekend, May 1st and May 2nd, first weekend of May, as usual. And if you have hosted a site in the past, we are planning on sending out an e-blast next week that, about hosting an event this year. And then, if you are interested in learning more on this topic, advocacy, other topics pertinent to Friends groups, strongly encourage you to check out our PTNY website for resources such as our best practices manual and Friends resource kit. Those are on our website. And if you are a group associated with New York State Parks, consider joining our Facebook group for Friends. We can keep this conversation going. Heather, yes, I just saw your chat. This presentation will be sent out to attendees. We recorded the whole session, so I will send out the presentation as well as the recording of this. And so with that, thank you again, everyone. Thank you for joining us, sticking around, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thanks, Erica.